Hello, and thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Chamberlain Osar, Channels Television here in Abuja. I'm joined by Heidi Adams from the Voice of America in Washington.
Thanks. I'm Heidi Adams at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Chamberlain Uso in Abuja brings you that story. It's another election year in Nigeria, and persons living with disabilities in the country are asking for guaranteed security, comfortable voting environment, and inclusion in the polity. They say improvement in these areas will encourage more of them to participate actively in this poll and subsequent elections. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has assured them of the provisions of assistive devices like Braille, ballot guide, magnifying glasses, posters, and total inclusivity in the electoral process before, during, and after the elections.
Just like every other Nigerian, persons living with disabilities are also standing up to be counted. These Nigerians represent about 3.32% of the total population, however, raising concern over some of the challenges they face ahead of the polls, including difficulty in getting their permanent voter cards. But some still find their way around some of these challenges.
I have transferred my voters polling unit from where it could be difficult to go. I want to go and vote, and I want to see how INEC is ready to accept me as a voter and as a person on a wheelchair.
This gathering in Lagos is to relay the feeling of some people living with disability from across the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. The research, among other things, sought to evaluate INEC provisions and preparations for their participation in the 2023 general elections under a new electoral act.
The assessment includes 1, a very high level of enthusiasm on the part of persons with disabilities to vote. And quite a number of them, a very good number of them, have done the needful. 1, by registering to vote.
In spite of the perceived enthusiasm and readiness of these special people to vote, there's a call for improved environment at polling units.
From what we have gathered from respondents so far, we've seen an improved participation from 2011 to 2015 and 2019. We're also seeing this improvement to come up this month. However, in all this improvement, looking at the total population of people with disabilities that are eligible to participate in the electoral process, it's still weak.
They are also calling for more enlightenment programs for persons with disabilities about their right to not just vote, but be supported to get elected positions. Timothy Crown, Adiribigbe, Channels Television News.
Well, joining us to discuss this is an advocate of disability rights, Justice Chukwu. Glad to have you on Africa 54.
Thank you, Chamberlain, for having me.
The elections are here, and people with disabilities in the country are faced with many difficulties, from accessing their voters' cards to participating in the electoral process. How do you and your members find your way around this?
Yeah, first, I think it's important to thank the government for signing the 2022 electoral bill into law, which has laid our foundation to a new birth for our democracy. So this has also introduced what we call the bimodal voter accessibility system, and has charged both the electoral umpire, the electoral candidates, and also the electorates to step up their games. Of course, you know that citizens with disabilities are not exempted from this this foundation or this things that the electoral system has introduced. And I also would like to thank the Independent National Electoral Commission for also providing different options such as online registration and also in-person registration for the permanent voter cards. But the challenge, I think, people with disabilities, whom I call citizens with disabilities, have is that some of them are not tech savvy and might be finding it quite difficult to register online, which to me was very more convenient. Some of them also would need to take some extra steps to get to the polling center, the registration center, where they would have to do their registration.
There's a very high level of enthusiasm on the part of these very special people to vote and be voted for, but they complain of not having the right environment in the country. Do you see the government providing a comfortable environment for their participation in the electoral process and, of course, their inclusivity in the polity?
Yes, Chimbley, and no at the same time. So yes, in the sense that the Independent National Electoral Commission and other sister agencies have been conducting workshops, training, and sensitization for people with disabilities. They have been trained on how to cast their votes and also how to, what to do during the elections, and also how not to allow themselves to be bought over by any political candidates. We also have a significant improvement on the ballot papers. Now we have blind people can access their ballot papers independently because we now have Braille ballot papers. Those in the albinism spectrum also are able to cast their vote this time around because the ballot papers, I understand, are written with enlarged prints. So I think there is some sort of more improvement on the aspect of INEC in making sure that people with disabilities are not excluded in the electoral process.
We've seen improved participation of persons living with disability in the electoral process over the years from 2011 to 2019. Do you see this turnout being replicated in this year's elections?
Their participation has increased with the expansion of the social media. They have access to Android phone. For those who have access to Android phone, they engage on social media, Twitter, Instagram, WhatsApp, and what have you, to interact and exchange ideas, and also have the opportunity to listen to different candidates, and what they have, for the nation, Nigeria. And they also have the ability to have an informed choices, to make an informed decision. So the participation in this 2023 has greatly increased. And like I rightly pointed out, the Beaver system, the new electoral law, has also energized citizens and given them more hope that things can turn around if they participate in the electoral process. And I'm sure that people with disabilities will be looking carefully to assess the manifesto of all the political candidates to see how those manifestos, or which manifesto would be very, very capable to handle or to manage their situations.
Well, thank you for joining us on Africa 54.
It's my pleasure, Chimbley.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. You can join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. After the break, as the drought crisis in Somaliland worsens, displaced women and girls face greater risk of gender-based violence. Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Haiti Adams in Washington. Aid workers say record drought in Somalia is hitting women and girls the hardest, putting them at risk of gender-based violence and seeing girls pulled out of school. Women and girls are forced to walk further from home to get water and education, making them vulnerable to attacks. Juma Majanga reports from Togdir in Somalia's breakaway region of Somaliland.
Sunset in Adan Saliban camp for drought-displaced persons in Somaliland brings vile memories to this 35-year-old mother of 6. In November, as her husband was bedridden with illness and she was putting her kids to bed, a man stormed their doorless hut and raped her. She does not wish to use her name due to stigma.
The lamp was still on, and so he saw me and came straight to me and started tearing off my clothes. I tried fighting back, but he overpowered me. Some people later responded to the noise and came to check, but he had already left.
Her case does not appear to be an isolated one in the drought-displaced camp of 2,000 households. Scores of Somali women and girls in the camp approached a reporter wanting to share their stories of being attacked or fears for their children. Aid workers confirmed the problems of gender-based violence and sexual and gender-based violence. The nearest clinic offering counseling for survivors is almost 100 kilometers away. The Ainaba Health Center says reported cases of GBV from just a few camps have more than quadrupled since the drought to 20 per month, but many more go unreported due to stigma.
We give them psychosocial support, and if the person needs, we refer to legal, and we give them legal support.
Aid workers say the attacks have also worsened access to education, especially for girls. Hadija Kule and her 4 teenage daughters have been in Adan Saliban camp since March after drought killed all their livestock. She says her husband died from the stress. Kule pulled her daughters out of the nearest school, a 5-kilometer walk from the camp, afraid they could be attacked on the way.
Perpetrators are all over the camp, making it very risky for girls and women. I can't even send my daughters out alone. We've tried to form groups, so if they're going to fetch water or firewood, they go together during the day.
Care Somalia says there are 900,000 drought-displaced children at risk of dropping out of school in Somalia, with 43,000 in Somaliland's camp already out, most of them girls. Authorities say they are trying to beef up security, but remote IDP camps like Adan Saliban don't even have power for lights. As the sun goes down, women and girls already suffering from the Horn of Africa's worst drought in a half a century face another restless night. Juma Majanga for VOA News, Togdia, Somaliland.
South Africa is experiencing its worst ever electricity crisis as local authorities across the country turn to private suppliers to help businesses and households keep the lights on. The government is planning to procure up to 500 megawatts from private power companies by 2026 to provide roughly a third of the city's annual 1,500 to 1,800 megawatts power needs. They are also looking at offering households monetary incentives to save power during peak demand periods to make up for the shortfall.
Stitching by candlelight, Faiza Caswell, a seamstress in Cape Town's Mitchell Plain Township, says she has had to give up a lot of her clients due to rolling power outages that have become a mainstay across South Africa.
A lot of people ask me to put in the solar panels, but unfortunately, as a small business, we don't make that much to put in the solar panels, and that the small businesses are only working from the hand to the mouth, and that's how I work. So we can't afford to put in solar panels.
That may change soon. Renee Salmon, who runs an alternative energy company in Cape Town, believes her all-female team may soon be able to create solar panels for low-income households and ease the impact of the persistent outages.
South African females are actually helping our other African sisters to be able to get electricity, and it is work that we do with our hands.
Reeling from South Africa's worst ever electricity crisis, local authorities across the country are turning to private suppliers like Renee Salmon to help businesses and households keep the lights on.
We have industry that's willing to come to the table. We have the residential sector that's willing to also do their part. And so through the SSEG program, we've now been trying to incentivize them to some degree to put up solar systems, and then we buy back the surplus power. And by buying back the surplus power, it's not intended to fully compensate for the cost of their systems. But what it does mean is that if they are, the system is designed in such a way that you do have a surplus.
Our idea is to just make up the shortfall that Eskom is not able to provide. In other words, that blackout shortfall, and stop the blackouts in Cape Town so that we can get the economy growing here, get investors interested again, get jobs coming back here.
Cape Town is taking steps toward total energy independence from Eskom beyond 2030. It issued a 200 megawatt solar energy tender last year and expects to follow that up with another for up to 300 megawatts of battery storage in the next few weeks.
Kenya's health ministry says sex education digital services launched to help rein in the country's teenage pregnancy problem have attracted more than 5,000 youths. Nena na Binti, which means speak with a sister in Swahili, gives information and counseling on reproductive health by mobile application and a toll-free number to Kenyan teenagers who have the world's highest rate of pregnancy. Victoria Amunga reports from Nairobi, Kenya.
Kenya's recent national data shows that 1 in 5 teenager girls is a mother by the age of 19. The country ranks 3rd worldwide in teenage pregnancy. 8 groups are trying to help by providing sex education digitally. One mobile application called Nena na Binti, which means speak with a sister in Swahili, provides teenagers extensive information on reproduction health and direct interaction with professionals and counselors remotely. It also provides a phone number for app users. Janet Awino is among at least 5,000 young people using the platforms, especially for family planning education.
I speak with a person that I cannot see, and that helps me be open. You can't speak with just anyone. Some people can't keep secrets.
Virginia Mushira, a mother of 1, says she could have benefited from the reproductive information such apps provide.
My mom and dad were not the type to teach me about these things. We would meet at the table to eat and everyone goes their own way. They would talk about other things, but not about reproduction. They wouldn't tell me.
A September 2022 study by Kenya's Ministry of Health found that a lack of information on reproductive health contributed to a surge in teenage pregnancies. Experts say many teens are afraid to speak with their family about sex and reproduction, and having access to such information can go a long way to remedy this.
A lot of the clients who call, if their adolescents 10 to 17, they want to know more about menstruation, have us call inquiring on safe days, have us call wanting to know the effects of contraceptive.
State authorities say they're training young people in communities to assist in programs that benefit young mothers.
Some want to go back to school, so we take them back to school. Others say they cannot continue with school, so we give them skills. Some are also taught about employability and starting a business.
Kenya's Ministry of Health adopted a 10-year national reproductive health policy in July that seeks, among other things, to address adolescents and young adults' reproductive health. Authorities hope that such initiatives as Nena na Binti will boost efforts to control teenage pregnancies in the coming years. Victoria Amunga for VOA News, Nairobi.
One village in Kenya's Samburu region, Umoja, has for the past 3 decades been offering women a refuge from gender-based violence and abusive husbands. Umoja, the all-female village, was founded by 15 women who fled from female genital mutilation, domestic abuse, and child marriage.
The thorny trees and dawn-caked homes of Umoja village make it resemble another in Kenya's northeastern Samburu region, except in one key detail: the absence of men. Since it was established over 30 years ago, Umoja has provided a refuge for women from the Samburu community and beyond, women fleeing from female genital mutilation, domestic abuse or child marriage. 26-year-old Christine Sitian, a mother of 4, says her husband assaulted her physically before she escaped.
I went through a hard time. I was being mistreated and did not have rights. And my children were not allowed to go to school. Now, I am proud to be a mother.
Losing hope in the relationship, she first tried to return to her home village, but the cattle used as a dowry to secure her marriage had been stolen. Co-founder of the village, Jane Nomuken, says that her mission is to ensure that girls are not forced into early marriage with older men. She believes girls should be allowed to choose their husbands. The women make and sell ornaments to buy food and send their children to school.
Some 2 million Ukrainian children have been displaced by the war. For those forced to leave and those still in Ukraine, the war can have severe psychological impacts. But a simple therapeutic tool is helping some kids cope. Anna Kostuchenko has the story narrated by Steve Baragona.
Anya is 9, and since day one of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, she has been in Kyiv with her parents, who did not give their last name. Shelling and air raid sirens are part of her daily life.
We boarded windows after 2 rockets landed 600 meters from our apartment building.
Their mother says she can see how the war is affecting Anya and her 2 sisters.
She became somewhat withdrawn, sometimes aggressive and tense. I was constantly worried this may end up with Anya having a nervous breakdown.
But Anya is getting some help from Hibuki, a word that means hugs in Hebrew. Hibuki is a therapeutic toy invented in Israel in 2006 as a way to help children deal with stress during the 2006 Lebanon War. In April 2022, Ukrainian psychologists started giving Hibuki toys to some of the traumatized children in Ukraine. Anya's family was one of the first in Kyiv to receive it.
After 3 or 4 weeks, we saw the obvious results. Anya started to communicate with kids again, became friendly, a lot calmer.
Victoria Nazarevich was one of the first professional psychologists in Ukraine to use it during her work with kids.
So many children are traumatized. They lost their homes. They suffer from daily rocket attacks. We were trying to find something that would help them deal with trauma, and it appeared to be a toy that children can hug and interact with.
Art therapist Marina Cherkashina says Hibuki helps kids dispel stress, which is healthier than keeping it all inside. And its paws always offer a child a much-needed hug.
We call it Huggy Dog. We have kids here who have not left Kyiv since the start of the war. They were the first children to receive Hibuki.
So far, over 5,000 Ukrainians have been able to experience the therapeutic benefits of Hibuki, thanks to the U.S. nonprofit charity United Help Ukraine. The group funds psychology training courses explaining how to work with Hibuki.
I'm trying to look like I'm okay, but inside, I panic.
8-year-old Pablo's mother, Mariana, said Hibuki helped her son a lot.
He completely changed. We got to see our child from new angles. He's more open now.
Ukrainian psychologists have also invented a little hedgehog toy that attaches to the child's hand. In addition, psychologists here are also using art therapy to help children deal with their trauma, while Hibuki sits nearby. For Anna Kostyuchenko in Kyiv, Ukraine, Steve Baragona, VOA News.
And that is our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Haydee Adams in Washington. Channels Television has our last word.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. Do remember, channelstv.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Chamberlain Usal. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.